Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Zog Science. Today we're going to be talking about evolutionary forces, kind of building on what we talked about last time with Darwin's theory of natural selection, getting into a little bit of now what we consider to be evolution, modern evolution, I guess to say. So neo-Darwinism, Darwinianism. That is a hard thing to say. Anyways, neo means new, so this is kind of like the new Darwinism. Darwin didn't really take into account genetics, mostly because he didn't know about it. They didn't understand, DNA. They didn't know what DNA did. They did, So what we have today is we have the theory called modern synthesis, and this explains evolution in genetic terms. So now we consider to be evolution changes in genetic characteristics of a population over time, or another way to say that would be change in allele frequencies over time. And that's the way that I'm going to really talk about evolution, is changes in allele frequencies over time. And natural selection is not the only mechanism that evolution can occur. We're going to talk about some of those other mechanisms in just a little bit. So there are kind of four forces of evolution that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about natural selection, genetic drift, gene flow, and sexual selection. So natural selection, we talked about this a little bit last time, right? Alleles that improve survival and/or reproduction will increase in frequency in a population. So it is going to be completely dependent upon the environment, and it is selective and adaptive. So you are adapting to your environment, and it is selective. Those individuals that have the traits that are more going to increase fitness are going to be selected for. This shows kind of some sampling sites that they did and as salinity increases, we see a change in LAP94 alleles. And so, we're just kind of seeing that the environment is able to affect the expression of well, not necessarily expression, but rather what alleles are found in a particular population. We also, as a part of natural selection, we can have predation selection. This is where you have predator and prey, and the prey are always trying to avoid the predator, either through camouflage or hiding, or maybe being faster or some sort of defense. And the predators are always trying to be able to catch the prey. So they want to be able to find them either through some sort of sensory organs, be faster or whatnot. And this is constantly occurring between both the predators and the prey. They are constantly adapting and changing to one another. Really common example of this is mongoose and cobras. Mongoose have adapted to be able to survive cobra venom. However, it does make them more sluggish. It does slow them down, but they are able to take it and fight it, and that's why mongoose are kind of known for being able to kill snakes, because they can actually survive cobra venom, and that's one of the things that they've adapted to be able to do. We can also have physiological selection. We are actually selecting different body structures or functions. For example, snakes being able to unhinge their jaws to be able to eat larger objects. That would obviously be physiological selection, the ability to do that being selected for. Things like color changeability in cuttlefish, right? So they have specific structures in their cells that have given them the ability to camouflage more easily, be able to hide, both to be able to grab prey and also to be able to avoid predators. So their actual body structures are being selected for. Finally, we can have coevolution. This is where two species are going to evolve together. Predator-prey would be an example of coevolution. We can also have competition occurring. So you're both competing for resources. Those individuals that are going to be able to get those resources are going to be able to do better. And then we also have symbiosis. That can be whether that's parasitism, mutualism, or commensalism. Any of those are considered symbiosis. And so a really, big example of that is pollinators and the flowers that they pollinate. Many times they have either specific smells or specific colors or specific shapes to where they can only fit each other. So you can see here that the hummingbird fits very nicely into this flower, and that is an example of coevolution. They've evolved together. All right, genetic drift is another Evolutionary force is a change in allele frequencies due to chance events. So this is not selective, nor is it adaptive. It is completely random. And these have a very large effect on small populations. The reason being that in a small population, random chance is going to have more of an effect. Think about flipping a coin, right? If you flip a coin 1,000 times, you expect it to be about 500 to 500, something around that. Now, obviously, there's going to be some variation, but in general, you get a 50% heads, 50% tails. If you flip a coin 10 times, it is very likely that you will only get, 7 heads, 3 tails, or maybe 9 heads, 1 tail. And so these random events have a much larger effect on small populations. This could be simply through breeding, right? Through mating. You could have changes in allele frequencies that would occur over time simply because, of independent assortment, right? Certain alleles maybe get passed on to the gametes that actually get involved in reproduction. So that is a way that you could have random chance that would actually push a population to have a certain allele frequency. We can have the founder effect. This is where a few individuals from a population start a new population with a different allele frequency than the original population. So, let's say that a couple of people get stranded on an island, right? They're only going to have certain alleles within their group that they are then going to be able to start a new population with. We see this a lot in island populations, whether it's in animals, plants, or humans. Island populations tend to have a lot of diversity that is very different from mainland because you have a few alleles that get concentrated in the founding populations that then get passed on to the rest of the resulting population. Finally, we can have the bottleneck effect. This is where a large population experiences some sort of drastic reduction in population size due to some sort of non-selective event, so either a famine, natural disaster, habitat destruction, and so you just through the kind of this random chance, you have an event that reduces the population down, you lose some alleles along the way, and you only get left with some alleles. And so again, those alleles, similar to the founder effect, are going to be expressed much more highly in the resulting population. So an example of that was the prairie chicken. And between 1820 and 1993, the habitat range of the chicken was reduced greatly due to farming and other activities, city building, all that kind of stuff. And so what we see is that because of the population size decreased so much, the number of alleles at each location decreased as well. And that actually leads to a much lower percentage of eggs being hatched because there's less genetic diversity. And you can see that as compared to other species as well, or no, sorry, other populations in other states. All right, gene flow is changes in gene frequency or allele frequency due to immigration or emigration. So this is individuals leaving or exiting. Let's say that an individual happens to be, one of only a couple individuals carrying a particular allele. If they leave a population, all of a sudden they take that allele with them. That's going to change your allele frequencies, pretty drastically. This could be a population or an individual coming from another population, joining in and bringing some alleles with it that then get spread within a population. And this happens a lot in animals where you have, maybe a couple of herds that they overlap every once in a while, and so you get some individuals that kind of mix around and move around. This used to be seen a lot more. Well, I guess right now in humans it is seen a lot because you have people that just move around all the time. People are going to different places, so you have a lot of gene flow that occurs within the human population. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different in humans at this point because we've colonized the whole world, and so we have intermingling that's going on, pretty much constantly between, kind of different subgroups. Sexual selection. Okay, this is the change in gene and the frequency of alleles due to gender preferences. This is selective. However, this is not necessarily always going to confer a survival advantage. Let's think about the peacock, right? It has these brilliant feathers that the females really like. They choose the most brilliant of all the males. However, having all those feathers does not make it particularly easy to evade predators, right? And it does take place in all sexually reproducing populations. So, we can kind of see that we have all these different traits that have been selected for over time. And many times this leads to what we call sexual dimorphism, which is where you have the males and the females of a species that appear different. And so you've got lions that have, their manes. You have different types of birds with different plumages, or you might have large antlers on deer. You also can have just structures that become much larger. And the reason why all these things is that they serve as markers for fitness. So females are looking for the most fit males, and this has actually been correlated with these structures, having these structures, whether they're larger or more brilliant, more colorful, whatever. They've been correlated with offspring surviving more often. So females are going to choose organisms that have those particular traits because they think and they know that their offspring are going to be able to have a better chance of surviving. One of the ways that we know this is that a study was done where they had different male frogs. These are gray tree frogs, and they produce different calls. So they look the same, but they produce different calls. And so what they did was that they isolated sperm from the frogs that made different sounds. They then crossed that with the eggs of a female. And what they found was that the LC males, they were able to have offspring that were able to get to metamorphosis faster, which means that they will become larger faster, which is much better because now you are able to avoid predators much more easily. They had better larval growths, at least in one of the years, and they also had better larval survival. So it's kind of interesting, how there is a reason why these traits have been selected for over a longer period of time in terms of increasing fitness. So some of the effects of evolution. Evolution occurs at a population level. It is not an individual thing. My allele frequencies are not going to change over time, right? But as a population of humans, our allele frequencies will change over time. And so we don't talk about evolution. Evolution occurs within a population or at a population level, not at an individual level. We can have kind of three different ways that evolution occurs. We can have directional evolution, where you are being pushed towards one extreme. A classic example is the moths in Great Britain during the Industrial Revolution. So as there became a lot of soot on the trees, the moths that were darker colored were much more easy to hide. So we had a directional evolution where they were being pushed towards being dark colored. Once they kind of cleaned up the coal emissions from the Industrial Revolution, the trees became much cleaner. And so we had directional evolution back towards lighter colors in moths. We can have diversifying, which is another, in your textbook, I think it calls it disruptional. And this is where you have evolution towards extremes. So you're not being selected for the mean, but rather being pushed towards either of the extremes. And then finally, you can have stabilizing, where evolution is being pushed towards the mean. You're being pushed towards having one single trait that is more beneficial than others. Another thing, traits are almost always inherited, but sometimes the environment does play a role. So here we've got some tobacco seeds. The tobacco seeds are rather, I guess, tobacco seedlings. These are a 3-to-1 ratio of green to yellow, and you can see that in this side, was grown in normal light. However, these on the right were grown in darkness, and so they all have the yellow trait. Now, if we were to take these yellow ones and put them into the light and let them grow for a couple more days, we would actually see that they would become green again. So traits, they are almost always inherited, but sometimes the environment does play a role. And then finally, traits can be physiological or behavioral. The only thing that really matters is reproductive success, right? All that matters is that for animals is that they want to pass on their alleles from one generation to the next. And so, we have some really weird strategies. For example, male praying mantises are killed and eaten after mating with the female. The female will eat the male. Also, the male anglerfish, whenever it finds a female, it will bite into the female and it will fuse. And this is the male right here, and this is the female. And the male is simply there to, provide sperm for reproduction to occur. So some very weird strategies that kind of develop because, again, the only thing that matters is reproductive success. So the peacock that we talked about earlier, right? You know, it's okay for it to have all this large plumage as long as it survives long enough to be able to reproduce. And it doesn't really matter if it gets eaten or not, you know, from the population perspective, because it has been able to pass on its alleles to the next generation. So evolution, you know, has kind of a different feel to it than some other things that we talk about. But anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. I'll see you next time.